bit of a controversial subject today, and that is widebanding your ham radio transceiver. This is often comes my way, and people will say to me, can I have that widebanded? Now, is it a really good idea now to take a brand spanking new radio and then modify it in such a way where it transmits out of spec? And in my humble opinion, I don't think it's worth it. Not these days. Back in the old days, it might have been a bit more acceptable because people were experimenting a little bit more with different frequencies. And I think fairly recently, within the last, I don't know how many years, perhaps one of you guys will tell me, but 7.1 to 7.2 megs became available. So a lot of the older transceivers, they won't transmit in that 7.1 to 7.2 range. Also, that we've had things like 5 megs to play with, and a lot of transceivers will not transmit on the 5 megs portion of the band, as well as things like 146 to 147, I think, became available as an NOV, and various other frequencies in between, like also 4 meters, 70 megs became available and was part of the amateur radio spectrum. Again, not very many radios do that. Now, going back, what we'll do is we'll talk about HFF, and I'll try and work my way up the spectrum. The HF portion. People will come and ask me, can I modify this particular radio? And when you ask them what it is they actually need, if it's not an older radio, it's nearly always CB. Now, the answer to this is I personally wouldn't modify any radio for CB. I would just get a CB because it does what it says on the tin. If it blows up, breaks, if it gets dropped in a puddle, anything, it doesn't really make any difference. All right, it's a CB. But an amateur radio can cost enough, really. Let's face facts. It can cost a fair amount of money. And what you're asking really is it to transmit between 2 filters. So normally, typically 12 meters and 10 meters. So you end up with you've got 2 very sharp filters and you're transmitting in between. And that can cause, especially in more modern radios where things are a little more delicate and certainly more, much tighter or efficient spec, if you like. So older radios, that was a little more tolerable, and typical examples of that would be FT857, I think, is an old favourite to turn into a CB. FT950, I think every one of those that's in existence now is a CB. FT2000s, they're another one, and the 200-watt version of it. TS480s were very popular. TS2000s, very popular sort of conversions in that sort of arena. And, there were others like 570s, the 590, I think, were quite popular for doing. The list goes on, and I'm not going to get involved in whether or not, about the CB versus ham thing. That's irrelevant. All I'm saying is it actually worthwhile doing? Older radios, like the FT857, 897, possibly they were quite a good radio to do it to. However, I'm not sure that the filter's going to be its most effective at that sort of frequency. I don't think they make great CBs. So it might be a good idea to get, a dedicated box. But let's leap forward a few years and then into the world of, say, things like the FT991 and the 991A, or the 101, or the DX10, or the 7610, or the 7300 or 705, whatever you like. Are these radios worth, or can they be modified for frequencies outside of the ham bands? The answer to that is possibly, but not always. The thing to really, really watch for, number one, is they are modified in a particular way from the factory. So, for instance, Yaesu, their radios are pre-designed to work on 5 megs. They set their firmware up in such a way that it sets the parameters that are safe for 5 megs for use on 5 megs. It reduces the bandwidth to a particular amount, the best that it can. It will drop the power, and it will sort of set, other parameters. It might channelize the frequencies, but the way that you access or activate that would be that you put the radio in a particular mode, and you enter a code, and then the radio will then transmit on 5 megs, but how best it can, so it doesn't self-destruct, basically. Things like ICOMs and stuff like that, they often will arrive in a country and they're modified by the importer to work with that particular country. Normally, that is, especially in the UK, it seems to be the case in the UK. So they're modified to work on 5 megs right from the get-go. However, other radios that sort of come through may need some modifications, but not usually much. The newer radios are already done. So that really only leaves one other reason why people would ask for something to be wideband, and that is typically CB. 99.9% of the time, it's because of CB. Would I take my brand spanking new DX10, my 7610, and modify it for that? And the answer is no. I wouldn't want to, number one, risk my radio because it is cost enough money. Secondly, I wouldn't want to jeopardize any warranty. And that kind of leads me on to then sort of saying, what tends to happen with these radios is that the filters are very, very tight. If you're transmitting between 2 filters, then you can cause components to become overloaded down the chain. So, for instance, if you're transmitting between 2 filter slots, if you like, and it's up against a hard brick wall, then pressure starts to build up down the chain. Components start running out of spec between each of the stages. So when it's almost like a chain effect. So when you alter the end, the next one down starts to feel the strain. That changes. The next stage down the line feels sees the change, starts to become under stress, and then that sort of can go on. And eventually what you find is something will fail. And that's exactly what happens when you modify your radio if it doesn't like it. It's not always the case, so don't quote me on that. It really is, that is just a very simplified way of looking at it. So HF nowadays is just for CB. So moral of that story is, would I get it done? Answer is no, I wouldn't do it. It's just not worth it. VHF and UHF. Now this one is quite funny really, because so many people ask for VHF, UHF modifications, and I'm sure it's the challenge, but that's neither here nor there. 9700s, 991s, 991As, and that type of radio, the newer ones coming through, they can't really be modified at all on VHF and UHF because they say it's the filtering. I don't know how true this is, I don't know, but there is no modification available that I know for either of them. There is talk that you can change the spec of the country spec, so you can change the EU version to a US one and get a little extra range, and you can do the same for the 9700. I'm told on the 991 that is a one-way trip, and it can't be undone. How true that is, I don't know. I've not tried it, and I wouldn't try it. It's just too much of a risk for me. So the 9700, again, that one is just not doable. I wish that there was a little button on there that you could bypass the filters or something like that, so you had a bit of a wider receive, so you could go and listen to Airband or do whatever, various other places. I suspect that ICOM have got an agenda there. They've obviously got a really nice scanner or general receiver, the 8600. I suspect they just want to sell those. Who knows? I mean, I'm not sales, so I don't know. So, maybe that's the case. But again, you can't modify that. I wish they had done that, but they haven't. So you're tied to the ham bands, and the same can be said for the 991, although I think you can listen to Airband and stuff on that. So Yeah, there you go. But why would you want to modify VHF and UHF? Well, typically, even newer radios now that come from the factory, they're not possible to transmit between 146 and 147. That one is a little bit of a bind because there's some digital experimentation that you can basically sign up for an NOV to play with at that range. So the radios don't do it, which is a shame. But the biggest one for me is handhelds. If a handheld comes, is people that want a handheld and ask me whether or not it can be wide-banded, 9 times out of 10, it's a paraglider. They want it modified to VX7s or VX6s or whatever they are, what they want them modified for some free frequency that they say, and use it on as a paraglider. But the biggest reason is PMR. People want to use their VHF, UHF stuff on PMR. I don't think this is a good idea. Again, I just don't think it's a great idea. You're kind of you're risking, causing a bit of interference because PMR is tied to 500 milliwatts. Correct me if I'm wrong. 500 milliwatts, and it's tied. You must have a fixed antenna. I do not know of any mobile radio versions of a PMR radio, because it needs a fixed antenna and it needs to be 500 milliwatts. So, but that is still the biggest reason. Probably 95% of the people that ask for a radio to be modified up in the VHF, UHF want it for PMR. Summing this up, do I think that widebanding is worth it in 2021? The answer is no. I don't think it's worth it. I don't want to jeopardize my radio for CB or PMR or anything else, for that matter. If it was an older radio, then possibly it would be a good idea. Although some older radios can't be done. Point example, well, it can be done, but need quite a lot of modifications. 847 for 70 megs, if you remember rightly, when that one was produced, and you put that on 4 meters, it would only transmit about 10 watts, and the current draw, which has skyrocketed. That was where one of those stages I was talking about, the in-between stages, I think it was an inductor, was becoming basically saturated, or a 6 meter inductor, I think it was, or a filter. And that needed to be altered. There also needed to be a preamp, I think, on it. But once that was done, I think you got about 25 watts and the current draw plummeted. So that was all good. So, in a word, don't think it's a good idea. 2021, no. I don't think it's a good idea. Not saying it's impossible. Some radios will still do it quite happily, but I just wouldn't do it. It's as simple as that. Thanks for watching. See you soon.